I'm Elder Chief Shirell. My native name is Parfait-Dardar, and what that means is healer of the land. That's the majority of my work. A lot of the work that I do involves advocating for environmental protection and preservation. We experience land loss here at an astronomical rate. And along with the land loss, we lose our estuaries, which means all the shrimp and crab, and for those of you that enjoy seafood, that population is steadily declining because of the things that we've done and are not doing, right? So a lot of the work that we're involved in deals with healing the land. One of the big projects we currently have is canal backfilling. Since the oil and gas companies didn't do what they were supposed to do, even though it was in writing, we don't have time to wait for them to fight it out in the court system, so we've decided to do it ourselves.
Good for you.
Absolutely. You know, each of us is supposed to be responsible for our own section, right? That's what we're here for. We're supposed to be contributing, protecting, preserving, sustaining. And our people have always lived that way, you know, for the most part. So when a lot of things were brought into the area, like oil and gas extraction, it offered opportunities for work, but our people didn't really realize at the time what that meant for our environment, right? It wasn't until later that we learned about the harms that it was causing and how these companies that were joining into that venture weren't being responsible, right? So our people have been advocating for a very, very long time, you know, to end the drilling, end the extraction, heal the land. You know, of course, everything ends up in litigation these days, and it just takes forever. So we've taken the steps to do it ourselves. Our people have been here since time immemorial. If you look on the maps that date back to the 1700s, you can see that the whole southern portion of Louisiana was Chitimacha. And that's the first people that were here. During the Indian removal era, as most of you know, is the Trail of Tears, our Choctaw and Biloxi ancestors that were over in Mississippi, instead of going over to Oklahoma, they came down here because there was some intermingling between them at the time. One of our ancestors, Takolabe, which means to killer, he was Choctaw and Biloxi. He also fought in many of the wars and was familiar with the area. He had interactions with the Chitimacha down here. And it was really good for them. Instead of going off to Oklahoma where they didn't know anyone, they decided to take lands here. Now we are still a part of the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek that he signed, okay, to accept land for exchange for the lands that were in Mississippi. However, that treaty, even though it's active, is not on it. So that's another thing that we constantly have to fight for and push for, is having the United States and the state of Louisiana honoring our treaty rights, and that we have not been successful yet. But it's inching closer through the different state departments, okay? Thanks to a lot of federal regulation changes that deal with discrimination, a lot of the departments are changing their rules, right? And they're like, okay, we don't care if you're federal, we need to be talking to everybody. I'm like, thank you, right? So that actually falls into alignment with the treaty. They are supposed to be talking to us. Yeah, but that's an ongoing thing for us every single day. We have been in the federal acknowledgement process for 26 years. In that 26 years, they've revised the criteria twice, moving the goalpost a bit further. According to the attorneys that we have that are reviewing what we've submitted, we should have been federally acknowledged since 1996. However, even though all of the evidence that we have, all of the documentation that we have exceeds the criteria, they want it put into a concise written narrative. So it's not just about, oh, here's your criteria, here's the documentation that meets it. No, they want us to take all of that and put it into like a 600-page narrative. Now, that's not something that we do. All right, we are not academia, most of us, okay? We're not lawyers. And the only way that I've been able to navigate the system is because I actually work as a legal assistant. Mm-hmm. It took my training in that to even understand what they were asking for, right? Now, with federal acknowledgement come benefits, but not like what most people think. You do qualify for funding for education, housing, health care, okay, economic development, things like that. However, there are a limited amount of funds, okay, for those programs. And when a new tribe gets acknowledged, there's no extra funds that get into that pot. Now you have a new tribe with more people fighting over the resources that are already there. So that's why a lot of federal tribes are against other tribes becoming federally acknowledged, because they already know they're not getting what they need as it is, right? So if you add another tribe and more people into the mix of that, it's going to strain the system even further. We understand that. We do. However, we're a tribe, always have been, you know, so our people feel that it's right, that we should be federally acknowledged, and we pursue it. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to stay, right? We, like I said, we have everything we could have ever needed here. Everything that can sustain us is here. We are a land and water people. We've sustained ourselves through fishing, shrimping, trapping, hunting. Now, the trapping is no longer an option for us because of the land loss. So we've basically lost that skill. All right. The only thing I think people really trap these days are like the feral hogs, which we don't have many of those anymore. You know, or the nutria. And the reason why they do the nutria is because they like to dam up everything, right? And yeah, they can cause problems. They can, especially in a floodplain. They can cause a lot of problems. They do still have a bounty on them, just like they used to, but the nutria is not so much a problem as it once was. You know, so again, a lot of our traditional practices, a lot of our life ways are steadily declining as we lose land, right? So our identity is directly connected to the land. And you'll see that in just about every area of the globe, right? Where people live defines them, literally, right? Because your resources are there. So, you know, for us, our area is water, land-based, mostly water today, you know, so that's why we do the things we do. That's why we're shrimpers and crabbers and things like that. At one time, shrimping, crabbing, oystering, you had no problems at all. You could make a good income. You had enough to feed yourself, enough to share with elders and others in the community. We're a sharing community as well. But you can't do that today. My husband's a shrimper. You know, we have all of the commercial licenses and things like that. We have the boat. But for the past few seasons, he's barely been able to catch. You know, so it's barely enough for us to even sustain ourselves. Which is another reason why we fight so hard, right? Because once it's gone, it's gone. You know, so that's a lot of what we do here. But we don't just do it for ourselves. We took the steps 14 years ago to join together with other tribes to create the first People's Conservation Council of Louisiana. Yes, thank you. We worked with the Ojibwe to create that. They came down, they gave us training. Nikki Crow is amazing. You know, so we do take the time to educate each other, and everything that we deal with here, we make sure to document. We love working with students, right? We love giving them the opportunity to come in, work with us, learn our life ways. It not only helps them to get an accurate education of who we are, but they go away with a completely different sense of understanding of the world around them. And it's actually helped them in their work, right? So it's a beautiful win-win relationship that way. And that's why we like to take the chance to educate every chance we get, because y'all are our future. Hey, I'm just here for a season, right? My time is short, just as all of our times are short here. And I want to make sure, and our people like to make sure, that we're using that time in the best way possible. And it's not about us, it's about our youth. Everything we do and everything we don't do will affect the next 7 generations. It's been seen, that's why we say it, because we've seen it, right? So it's the same understanding: when you know better, do better. You know, so we're steadily trying to advocate here, and everything that we do, we make sure is written, it's documented, so that we can share it with other communities as well that will be facing the same challenge. Make no mistake, we're on the front lines right now, but we're not the only ones. And the only way we're going to make it through this is if we take the time to educate each other, right? So with the canal backfilling that we're doing, yes, right now that's affecting us, okay? But you have other areas around the globe that are experiencing some of the same things. Maybe not directly in the same way as our problem was created, but it's similar. So a lot of the tools and skills that we learn in dealing with our problem can actually help another community somewhere else. And that's what it's about. It's about learning from your experiences and making sure that you document those things and you share them. You make them available, right? And I thought we did pretty good here with that. You know, we're trying, we're learning every day. Being who I am is way more important to me today than it was when I was in my 20s. Because I didn't understand it, right? I knew who I was, right? But I didn't understand how significant that was. I really didn't grasp how beautiful our culture is, right? And how important it is to protect that. You know, it's I guess it's wisdom. I'm in my 40s now, you know, and we gain wisdom as we age. So that's a beautiful thing. And every chance that we get, you know, to help share that beauty, to help exchange that knowledge, to grow a little bit more in wisdom, we like to make sure we take those chances every chance we get, you know. So we've partnered with Williams College. They've been coming down here with us probably for 8 years now. Every semester we have a group of students that comes down, so that way they're not just looking at the problems in a book, right? And that's wonderful. I'm glad you get to read about these things, but you really don't know unless you get to see it for yourself and touch it, right? Really experience it. So that's one of the other things that we did, is we've opened ourselves up. At one time we were very closed off, we were very secluded, and we liked it that way, right? But it really wasn't helping us as far as trying to get resources down here. So we decided to start opening ourselves up, and it's actually grown, and it's produced a lot of good results. You know, that's one of the reasons why y'all are here today. Just by opening ourselves up and being willing to educate, right? And then not being afraid to say, hey, this is what this community needs. You know, we've been able to make a lot of progress. Yes. And hopefully I'll be here for a long time. I like agitating things. I was agitating them in Baton Rouge yesterday. I don't know why they don't get rid of me. You know, I think that's one of the biggest things, is trying to advocate for good policy. You know, because it's not just on the local level that we have issues. The further you go, the more you learn, and the deeper it is. You know, so a lot of the challenges that our community faces is all the way on the federal level. Now we've seen them start doing some good things, you know, trying to change some of their policy. But that hasn't quite trickled down yet, you know, and until it does, we're just gonna have to keep doing what we do. If they won't do it, we will. You know, and because of groups that we've partnered with, like Lowlander Center, you know, creating First Peoples, we're also part of the environmental justice, the environmental justice group as well. We've created our own indigenous disaster case management group because FEMA was not coming down into the community to assist people with applications. You know, and they're like, oh, just get online. We're like, we don't have electricity. How are we going to do that? You know, so rather than leaving people stranded, we took the time to create our own systems. And that's the one thing that we try to make people understand. Keep that in the back of your mind while you're playing around in these systems that everyone's created, right? You can't be fully dependent on the system. You hit a roadblock, after roadblock, I wouldn't hit too many of them. That means it's just time to create something on your own, right? And if it works, people will come. They will. I think we're kind of living proof of that. You know, it is working. It's been very slow in the communities. And again, because we don't have access to resources that we need because we're not federal. And being a state recognized tribe really doesn't give you benefits. They see you, or at least they say they see you. You know, but it doesn't open us up to any type of resources. Those are all things that we have to go after on our own. You know, so we're really hoping that once the community center is up and running, we'll be able to bring in opportunities for education because we have language barriers, we have education barriers that many people in the community are trying to overcome, you know, and we feel that having this as a central office, we can start getting people access to the resources that they need to be able to create that positive progress moving forward. You know, and you guys are all a part of that. And we're very, very thankful.
Can you speak a little more about how this facility will be used?
Yes. So, we have huge plans. We see this first and foremost as a place for people to come and get information, right? Because a lot of people don't have access to internet, especially our elders, and they shouldn't have to. Nobody should ask them to have to be a part of that world. That's a new thing. And we want people to have access to disaster resources and how to navigate those systems. We want them to be able to know how to reach out if they need help for their utility bills, if they need assistance with their medication. We also want to bring in language preservation. We can work with Codafil. We speak Indian French. It's basically an amalgamated language, right, that's developed over time, and it's still very, very much used here. And we need to protect that as much as possible. Our language is not written, but that's one of the programs we want to bring in here is to protect and preserve that language.
You don't write it at all?
It's never been written. Yeah. Our people are storytellers.
Oh.
Yes, we handed things down through storytelling, right? Not through writing. So the written language is a foreign concept to most of our elders, you know, because your word is your truth. And as long as that word carries, then you're never forgotten. But in today's world, it's got to be in writing, right? So we're going to adapt, and we're going to make sure that that's accessible to our younger generations and anybody in the community that wants to learn it, because it's a beautiful language, you know, and it should be preserved. But also, eventually, we want to bring in teaching classes. We have, it used to be called the GED program at one time, but now they call it the High Set. The closest place for people to be able to go to access those classes is about 40 minutes away.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's just impossible for some people, right? Transportation issues, things like that. So rather than having them have to struggle to go way outside of the community just to be able to get their high set, no, we want to bring that here in the community. You know, it's a central location that it's easy to get to, and we can get them set up and get them the help that they need. because in today's world, you literally need some type of diploma just to be able to get a job. All right. And with the decline in the traditional business that we're used to, which is seafood, people are struggling. And because they don't have that education, that training, or that high set degree, they're stuck. We can't leave them like that. So this location is going to be able to provide so many different services. It's going to take time to get it running, right? We're going to have a really good schedule, and that's where Crystalline is beautiful. Okay, because she keeps everything organized. She keeps me organized. That's amazing in itself. But we want to be able to have a steady flow of information, resources, and opportunity coming through this location, right? Because it's all about helping each other grow. It's about building each other up. And I think we can do that. I do. And I also think that we can serve as an example as well, right? For other communities that probably are in the same situation we are, but don't really know what they need to do to get started, right? So we can basically give them a handbook that says, okay, this is the basics, and you can customize this based on your own needs, right? So yeah, it's going to be a really good thing. And I can't wait for everybody to actually see it come to life,
Do you feel comfortable sharing your experiences, or at least what you observed during Hurricane Ida
Yes.
in the area?
So we evacuated, if you want to call it that. We were about an hour away in Thibodaux. And where we were staying at, we were fortunate because that eye wall just passed right on the side of us. Yeah. It was scary. It was very scary, and we couldn't go too much further. I need to be close to my people, and we didn't have the vehicles that we're able to handle going to Texas or somewhere else. Plus we didn't have enough time. When we came down, it's like the further down you came, the worse it got. Now, I've survived hurricanes and grew up in hurricanes. I remember them when I was 5 for Hurricane Juan. We rode it out on Mr. Willis Trosclair's shrimp boat. That was tradition. Okay, we'd all jump on this huge shrimp boat and ride it out, right? You had everything you needed there. You had power, you had food, you had water, everything was there. So everybody would jump on somebody's shrimp boat, and dock, and everything is safe harbor. You can't do that today, right? It's just not safe for that. My neighbors across the street learned that for Ida. So what they do is they set the booms out, right? Those big poles that you see sticking up on the shrimp boats like this, they set them out like this. And what it does is it balances that boat, right? It keeps it nice and balanced. So when those storm surges come through and those winds come through, you can hold that boat steady. And that's a good captain that knows how to do that. All right. Well, my neighbors across the street said their boom, the boat was all the way sideways when Ida came through. I probably would have just panicked and died right there. So, but we knew not to stay in the area. Look, best thing to do is just get out of the way, right? You can come back afterwards. So, I don't think I've ever seen so much destruction in my life from a storm. We were protected from the flooding, but we weren't protected from the wind. And that's what Ida did. Ida was mostly wind for us. My home was destroyed. My shop, my sewing shop, because I'm a dressmaker, that's how I make my living, was destroyed. All of my machinery, everything gone. And so many people were in that situation that it was really sad to see that our government, even knowing where we live, the ones that should be prepared for this, weren't. You know, and that was one of the scariest things for me, was realizing that we were not equipped to deal with this, but we should have been. It was really difficult going back and forth from Thibodaux every day. You know, like you're losing hours there just traveling, plus the cost of fuel, and the availability of fuel was a challenge because now you got everybody having to use generators, right? So the only thing that was really stable was this outside area that my husband had made. It was attached to my house. So what we did was we took the rubble from my house and made a makeshift shelter so that we could be in the community on the property where we needed to be to start doing the work. That's very typical of people here, right? You got to be on your property to start cleaning things up and trying to get your life back together. You don't have time to wait. But what made it even more challenging was insurance companies were collapsing and not wanting to pay people for their damages, right? So a lot of people had to fight their insurance companies to pay for their damages. FEMA funding only pays so much, right?
They come out.
Yeah, thank you. They don't even come down to the area. I know we had to push for that. It was an absolute nightmare. And again, that's another thing this community center is going to serve as. We want to get this repaired in a way that's resilient, so that there's an area for people to be able to come to access resources after a disaster, right? We had people that were sleeping in their cars, you know, sleeping in rubble, didn't have access to clean water because the water lines were all busted. You know, it was really bad. And again, the ones that should have been prepared for this, that should have been responsible for taking care of these communities, weren't. They really weren't. You know, so we've learned enough times that, okay, if it's broken, don't look at them, just fix your own system. So that's another thing that we're trying to do here. You know, people need clean clothes. They need a place to get clean, right? Because that, all of those things, everything is connected. Yeah, so if you don't have a place just to wash the day off of you, all right, you're in insulations flying around everywhere, all right, you got tons of dust in the air from all the rubble, mold spurs are in the air. You know, people need a place to be able to get clean, and they didn't have that. So we want to make sure that we can provide them with what they need, you know. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And we saw between the last couple storm seasons how quickly those storms intensify and how severe they are and how much more frequent they are. So that really opened our eyes, you know, and you have to be prepared for that. You do. You know, so hopefully with the skills and the tools that we were able to pick up from Ida, and that's a hard way to learn. You don't want to have to learn in the moment, right? If you have the opportunity to learn in advance, please do so, because learning on the spot, that's rough. But we've done it. You know, we've always been a resilient people. Our ancestors were mound builders because we knew where we lived, and it's that indigenuity, right, that we need to hold on to, that's still within us, to be able to understand where we live and what our present day challenges are, right, and use that wisdom from our ancestors during their time and say, okay, what can we do, understanding the environment that we live in now, right? Well, you need to be resilient, and that's something that everyone needs to be. You need to be able to get those tools and skills to understand resiliency, especially where you live, right? Because you never know. And we're not the only ones. Over here we deal with hurricanes. You know, we have to deal with flooding, wind damage from hurricanes, But if you look around the world, you have areas that are flooding that have never flooded. You know, we have California right now, between the wildfires and the flooding they're going through. I mean, you know, you got earthquakes, so no matter where you go, you are dealing with natural forces for those areas that have been exacerbated by the climate crisis. And believe me, this is a crisis. We are literally at the tipping point. Okay, and pretty much everything that we do revolves around that fact, especially today. Because if we don't learn, if we don't do what it is we know we need to do, we're not gonna make it. We won't. And for us, that means forced resettlement, and that means being resettled in a way that divides us, which will completely obliterate our chances at federal acknowledgement, and it will destroy the community as we know it. We will no longer exist. Our identity will become that of whatever new community we move into. And that's just the way it works. Every community has its own dynamics, right? And we become assimilated into these different communities over time, you know, and the unfortunate part of that is when one community can no longer exist, they're erased, you know, and they're lost to history. So documenting things, doing our own documentaries is also going to be something that we're doing here, doing our own storytelling, but making sure that it's documented. Because the reality is we don't know how much longer we're going to exist. And at least, should that time come, that our people are no more, then you'll be able to still learn about us. You know, and who we were, and where we were, and why we did the things we did. You know, so I guess it's really tricky when you have to navigate things based on being an indigenous community. You know, trying to make sure that things are preserved and documented. You know, but that's been my work for the last 16 years. Yeah. And yeah, it gets really challenging when you have your own life in the middle of a storm, you know, and your home is destroyed, and yet so are the majority of your people. We don't have time to stop. We don't. And you know that when you are appointed to this position. You know what you're being called to do. You know, so I still have not had time to grieve. I will when it's time. You know, but that's just a part of leadership. Right? You have to be able to understand your place, but understand that it's bigger than you. And our people were hurting. And they're still hurting. You know, so I'm really hoping that this will be able to lift their spirits and give them some faith. You know, that look, it's not over. It's just a bump in the road, and we're gonna figure this out. You know.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's what it's about, right? Like I said, the more we know about each other, the better off we all are. You know, I think it's just about respecting and honoring each other, really. You know, we're very diverse.
As people from all over the country, I think, that have come here to work with you guys this week, is there anything that we can do to support the canal backfilling project that you're working on?
Well, I'd say definitely if you have an opportunity where you find yourself in a platform that, you know, opens up for that discussion, like, hey, there's this climate crisis, what are different people doing about it, right? Where in our area of the world, that's one of the things we're doing.
And can you elaborate a little bit on what canal backfilling is? 'Cause I'm not actually familiar with.
Absolutely. So when oil and gas companies came through here, they dredged these canals, right? And that's because they needed to cut a path to get to where they wanted to drill.
So they made it deeper.
Absolutely. Now we're a wetland, okay? It's a floodplain, and we had the youngest land in the United States because it was being grown by the sediment from the Mississippi River. So when they levied everything off, that cut off our lifeline. The sediment wasn't coming down anymore, right? It wasn't feeding the land. Well, then they started cutting these canals for oil and gas exploration, and instead of them filling them back in, they have they put all of the mud that they've dredged on the sides. They call those spill banks, right? And they look like little levees, all along. Well, instead of them coming back when they were done with their extraction, taking out that well, pushing that spoil bank back in and letting it heal, no, they didn't do that. And they didn't do anything they were supposed to do. They have so many abandoned wells and so many canals, and the state does not want to hold them responsible. Oh, because it'll scare them away. They shouldn't be here. But we can argue that point all day long. So that's what we're doing now. Now look, it's gotten to the point where not all of the canals are able to be backfilled. They've opened up too much, or they're too deep, right? You have to have spoil bank on the sides that you can pull back in, or you have to have another means of getting some type of sediment in there to fill it back up. And over time, if there's enough land around them, it will heal itself. It's been proven very effective in Lafitte. Okay, there's a very successful program that they're doing over there, right? So it's proven to work, and it's very cost effective, almost no negative impact on the environment. The only thing that's negative is we got to use big fuel driven equipment, right, to get this done. Other than that, it's a completely natural process. We've identified 4 canals in this area. We're waiting on the landowner to give us the go-ahead for the permits. So that's just one small thing that we can do to try to heal the damage that was caused. We have to let Mother Earth heal. We're damaging her faster than she can heal. And that's not respectful. It's not good practice. We can't stress it enough. Our life is directly dependent upon this planet. If we continually damage her, she will not be able to sustain us. It's that simple.
For those canals, so you're talking like barges, big excavators, and that you're doing it yourselves because the government's not. So who funds that?
We have had to look for grant funding. Now, so far, we were able to work with the National Academy of Sciences on a grant, and the National Estuary Program on a grant, but that's only enough funding for the permitting phase and some of the engineering for this project. So we're having to piecemeal this together, right? And that's okay. We will piecemeal all day long if we have to. But so far, that's the only parts we've been able to get funded was for the permitting and like 60% of the engineering. And now we're looking for the funding to actually implement those projects. Fingers crossed, we'll be able to find it. But yeah, this project has been ongoing for, I'd say probably 10 years now. Yeah, so we're getting there. Just a little bit at a time. Yeah.
Awesome. It sounds like you're doing like amazing work.
Thank you. I come with a big team. This is not work that you can do alone. And look, we're not put here alone. So nothing we do should be done alone. We're here to be, responsible to and for each other. And I don't know what I would do without my team. There's no way that I could do it. If it weren't for the Christina Petersons, Shirley Laskas, Chrislyn Rodriguez of the world, I would not be able to do the work that I do. And again, amazing volunteers like yourselves, right? Because there's no way we could do this all on our own. People work. We are a growing elderly population. We are not bringing our elders in here to have to do this kind of work. So yeah, you gotta get help sometimes. And so don't think for 1 second that the work that you're doing here has not made a huge difference. It actually does. We're that much closer to being able to implement the programs that we want to be able to implement to get this community up and running. Because boy, when it was functioning, it was good.
Well, I think we're really, all of us are really honored to be a part of this process in a small way. And Brian, do you think we have time for more questions, or do you want to give people time?
You're with us for a bit today?
Oh yeah,
A little bit?
I'll be here today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got some work to do. I'm sure we have lots of questions, and if you're maybe like me, or your brain is just absorbing all of this information you've shared, thank you. But I think maybe if we can rally for work for a bit, 30, 45 minutes, take lunch, and if we have some questions, maybe in some small groups if you're comfortable, we can ask more questions.
I have a question for you, Brian. Do you want the other groups to come here for lunch?
That'd be great.
Okay, you want to text Gabby?
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Hey, happy to do that. All right.